I am Amara Charles, and I am pleased to introduce Magick Talks for the month of April with Greg Magick Bernstein and myself. First, I'd like to, just really thank you for being here, and we welcome you on this call. We know your time is really valuable, and we intend that all these calls are really powerful and life-changing. So now I'd like to tell you a little bit about Sacred Voyages before beginning today's transmission, just in case you haven't been on this type of call before or haven't heard of us before. Sacred Voyages facilitates spiritual transformation, and these happen in powerful retreats that are, designed and take place in power places in Hawaii and Mount Shasta. Retreats take place in specific places where the energy of the land is really special and unique in that it amplifies and it catalyzes and accelerates all of our growth together. The transformation and the connection with spirit. That's what really happens in these magical places. Change that has never been possible before happens almost instantly in these places. And so these are powerful and potent concentrations of awakening and transformational power. Magick has been leading these retreats in Hawaii since the 1990s, and for many years he trained with a number of kahuna, as well as with various mentors and shamans. His transformational background is a deeply woven tapestry of various traditions and lineages and teachings from both the East and the West. This talk will be a shamanic transmission, a technique by which we will use storytelling and other techniques to broadcast a frequency of wisdom that has been shared. This means that there's much more going on than what is being said. There's much more going on than what's being conveyed. There's actually transmission happening. The transmission itself is often more important than the knowledge, the concepts, or the information. Magick may tell stories that don't make sense. He might not finish stories, and we might weave in stories together, or we might speak of other unusual ways that effectuate the transmission. Magick has invited me on this call today since we're facilitating a retreat in July together on Maui called Mystical Heart. And yes, so we thought it would really be fun to do this call. This is my first time doing this call with him. And my background, I am the author of the Sexual Practices of Kodoshka, and I've been also leading retreats for the last 30 years around the world. And we're really, really excited to do the first retreat together. And this is actually the first time that we'll be sharing in this way together. Also, today's talk really amplifies the power of the sacred sites of Hawaii. And Magick will be leading this call, and I'll be weaving in and out as I see places of openings. So there is no agenda or plan for the call. We're going to simply tune into spirit, our inner guidance, and our higher selves, which is a communication with our higher selves together, and speak from that place. And what we say or what we talk about, well, no one really knows, including Magick and I. And in this way, the most poignant truth is going to unfold organically and naturally from who is gathered in this moment. Whatever is happening in this moment can arise. So that's enough from me. Let's get started. Again, thank you for attending. And please enjoy today's talk. If you have any questions or thoughts during or after the call, please feel free to email us by going to the contact page on our website, sacredvoyages.com or amaracharles.com. Thank you and enjoy the call. Here's Magick to start the transmission.
Thank you so much, Amara. I'm very excited to share this call with you today and to be doing the retreat together. And when we were waiting for the call to start, somebody had asked about the energy of the different Hawaiian islands. And are they different because they'd been to one island and not another? And the Hawaiian elders actually say that each of the Hawaiian islands are a chakra, and that the entire Hawaiian island chain is actually the chakra system of the planet, and that each island resonates that particular frequency. And that's actually been my experience. One of the reasons why I love to lead retreats in Hawaii is because the sacred sites of Hawaii are a little bit different than some of the other places I've been around the world, like Mexico and Palenque and Tulum and England and Stonehenge and all these various places. They're very powerful. But there's something about the sites, well, Hawaii in general, it's the most isolated set of islands in the entire world. And part of that isolation has meant that they've been less influenced by other cultures. The Hawaiians say that they actually came to Hawaii from the Pleiades, that they came from the stars. And one of the kahuna that I've spent a lot of intimate time with, one who isn't on a public path, he doesn't have public teachings, he lives actually in the jungle, in a sacred site, with no possessions. No possessions at all. He's just there to tend to this site. And he has tattoos all across his face and entire body depicting sacred geometry and depicting the Hawaiians coming from the Pleiades in these canoes. And he lives in a site that is a potent concentration of energy. And it's a particular kind of energy. And that's the thing that's special about the sacred sites in Hawaii, is that each one has a different energy. In fact, I remember Amara and I actually going to a site that's a birthing site. And it's a birthing site not because the ancient Hawaiians saw that this would be a great place to go and birth their next king. It's because the ancient Hawaiians saw that the energy of the land in that site already holds the frequency of birth. That's the energy of the land. That's the multi-dimensional field, the Nagual field, the crack between the worlds in that particular site is that particular slice of reality, so that it amplifies, it catalyzes, and it accelerates all evolution, transformation, and awakening in the form of birthing. The birthing of what's new for you, the birthing of who you really are on the planet, the birthing of anything. And back during the, say, from 1100 AD up until the mid-1800s, that whole site was actually off limits, kapu, to anyone but royalty, because it was so sacred. And it had such incredible power to actually instantly manifest anything, to instantly birth anything. And so we went there together, Amara and I, and it was a very powerful day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
that picture we have, it was taken on that day. The picture was up on wherever it is, and yes, I remember that day. It was really very beautiful, and it was one of the first times that I really felt you, and I felt like, you know, we were entering into a place of extreme potent peace, and the thoughts, the feelings were completely amplified, and I just remember like pure joy. That's what I remember. So I think this idea for this retreat, I remember sitting there and we were saying, yes, someday we should do something together. And finally now it is happening, and it was birthed in that place. So about how magical is that?
Indeed. So it's fascinating because that place holds the energy and the frequency of birthing, where something could come into actualization, into material reality out of nothing. And there are other sites that are the frequency of death, the frequency of the releasing of the old, of letting go of something that's not serving you, releasing your fears, your doubts, whatever it might be. The first time that I ever went to a death site, I had a very powerful intention, and it was actually a material intention, because, the sacred sites don't really care whether you come with a spiritual intention of awakening and experiencing oneness and divinity and all that you really are at an absolute level, or you come with a relative intention of something that you need in this physical reality, such as more money, relationships, health, well-being. It doesn't really discriminate. You walk in with what you walk in with, and it gets amplified. It's like recently, actually, I had a hernia, and I was going to lead a retreat, and I was having incredible pain in my body. And it was difficult for me to stand, and it was difficult for me to actually just walk around. And I had a retreat coming up on Maui this last January. And so when the retreat started, the first place we went to on that retreat was a healing site. And it's a temple that the ancient Hawaiians built up on a hillside. And the Cryon, the channel, is actually channeled that it's the oldest temple on earth. And there's a Hoonah. This temple was actually buried for many, many years, because when invaders did finally come into Hawaii in 1100 AD, they began to suppress the Hawaiian culture and the Hawaiian spiritual way of life. And eventually some of these temples became buried under, shrubs and grass and trees. And this particular temple was that way for many, many years. In fact, before it got buried, because when the Tahitians came in, they brought a caste system, and they brought a system where people were punished if they violated many, many rules that they brought in. They brought separation itself into a culture that was living in oneness and unity consciousness. The most important word in Hawaiian language is aloha. It's love. It's the unconditional love that we all already are. And so they came in and brought this system of division. And if you broke the law, you would be killed. But this particular sacred site is so powerful for healing that if somebody were to escape and they were to actually get to this site and get into the walls and inside this site, they would instantly be healed, instantly absolved, forgiven, and a kahuna would come and take them through rites of passage to release them back into society. Because the site can instantly heal anything. It can shift something just like that, even things that have been impossible to shift in our everyday physical reality. So I went into this site with my hernia, and there's a large stone in the back of the site, 1,500 pounds. And it used to be a stone that the kahunas would come and they would mix elixirs in that they would give you for healing. And I was guided to sit right in front of this stone and place my hands on it and close my eyes. And when I did, two kahuna, two ancient spiritual figures appeared. And they started mixing an elixir into this bowl, and then it began to pour into my hernia site. And as it did, it started to awaken inside of me a history of conditioning from my family, from my father, from my father's father, and his father's father, and from masculinity as a whole on the planet. And all of the woundedness and the feminization and the out-of-control masculine energy that has been harming this planet for thousands of years, stored in me, in this area. And I get goosebumps right now when I remember the activation of it, and my whole body began to shake. And fear was rushing through my body, and anger was rushing through my body, and tears were coming down my face as it was all being healed. It was being resolved inside of me. And then they started pouring another elixir in my head, and it started to pop up the belief systems and the fears and the doubts and the suppression of the divine masculine, of the masculine in the light. And that started to heal and resolve and get activated and flamed on inside of me. And that was a feeling of elation and joy. And this lasted for about an hour. And I'm giving you the short version, but at the end of that, I walked out of there and I never had a pain that was significant again in that hernia spot until I had surgery on it. In fact, I came out realizing that I could actually heal it myself. And it was only later when I was guided to have the surgery that I did.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, these sites, they each have their own power, and that one is a healing site. And so whatever might arise, whatever is needed, you know, I remember my partner and I at one time were contemplating opening up our relationship. We're in a closed monogamous relationship, and we were contemplating the opening of it. And I suggested that we each really go into a deep dive to find the truth. Like, not what do we want, not what does our ego want, but what is really in the highest good of all concerned, and can we tap into our higher selves to get that? I call it our omnipotent self. And it's one of the things that some of the sacred sites amplify. There's a site on Maui called EL Valley. And in addition to being a death site, in addition to being a male-female balancing site, it is a site that activates and catalyzes and amplifies one's connection with higher self. There's a 2,200-foot monolithic, narrow mountain that rises up out of the valley that they call the Needle. And it's also the phallic symbol of the masculine and the feminine. But the Hawaiians say that it is the finger of God coming down and touching the earth. And it is the finger of the earth coming up and touching God. It is the as above and the so below. And the Hawaiians would say it's the piko, or it's the umbilical cord from heaven to earth. And this place, whenever I go there and I'm trying to learn more about my inner guidance, it just amplifies it. There was a man that came on one of my retreats, and he wanted to possibly marry his girlfriend. And he was, 95% sure he wanted to marry her. He brought her on the retreat and he brought a wedding ring, but he wanted to make sure that that answer came from spirit. And so he came to me and said, what do I do? And I said, well, as you know, he'd been on 4 or 5 of my retreats. When you're on a retreat with me, I invite every person in every moment to follow their inner guidance. And I teach people how to do that, how to cultivate a conscious connection with your higher self so that you can be in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing in every moment. And when I say right, I don't mean right and wrong. I mean like highest choice for the greatest synchronicities. And so I said, why don't you just ask? Ask spirit for the answer. And then we went to EL Valley. And I told the people there, after I talked to them as I'm talking to you, I let them go and have their own experience in the valley directly. And I invited them to follow their inner guidance. And so he was walking through the valley, trying to discern this inner guidance that I'd been teaching about, when he really tuned in with it, maybe for the first time, where he really was like, oh, that's it. I've got it identified, and I can separate it from every other voice in my head, every other sound, every other feeling, every other picture. Like the way that I was teaching it, you can learn to know the voice of God or the sound of God like it's the back of your hand. So you always can distinguish it from anything else. And he heard it, but it said something that was a little unusual to him, because there's trails in the valley, but this voice said, go straight into the jungle. So he ends up walking through the bush, and he's like pushing the bush away and crawling through things and climbing over things, and he keeps checking in. Are you sure? And it's like, yes, go this way. So he's following it a few hundred feet deep into the bush, through the jungle, through trees and bushes and rocks, and he gets to this one spot, and he's guided to sit down by this rock and to just sit there. Just like that day, when I said to my partner, I said, we should find from our inner guidance what the truth is about whether we should open the relationship up. And she said, okay, great, I'm going to go do that work. And I said, I'm going to go do that work, and then we will meet back up. And I went to EL Valley. And I went to a very special spot in the valley that I was guided to that has a particular amplified vibration and frequency. And I laid down on this rock and I began to breathe and just be present with what is. And what was present for me was a lot of fear, because there's a lot of unknown if we open the relationship. You know, complete unknown. I had no idea what would happen. She could be with a man and she could fall in love with him. I mean, you know, there's so many things. And so I felt this palpable, intense fear. And I just laid there and was experiencing it. Most of our suffering in life is from the resistance to what is. If we just allow what is to be present, then it actually can do what it's there to do. You know, from the Deer Tribe teachings and the medicine wheel with the emotions in the South, it's the place of fluidity. It's energy in motion, emotion. So they're supposed to move. And the way they move is when we actually allow them to be present. And the way that we can allow them to be the most present is to actually love them. To completely, unconditionally love what is, no matter what it is. To stop pushing some things away and pulling some things closer, wanting this and not wanting that, and actually embrace reality exactly the way it is, whether we like it or not, fully and completely, and to love it and merge with it and become one with it.
And sometimes, you know, I call that having, you know, intimate fluidity. And that intimacy, just allowing the waves of different feelings come through. And so when we're really intimate and allow ourselves to really feel the emotion, and rather than just being like, you know, swept away by this like barrage or flood, and sometimes you just need to let it just flood all the feelings and let it just flood in. There's this place of intimacy where we're able to look into our darkness. We're able to, you know, instead of like taking that fear and going no and saying I have to get rid of this feeling, I have to get rid of this fear, we just allow ourselves to just be intimate with that fluid flow of our emotions. And there's something that happens when you do that. I went to EO Valley with you. I don't know if you remember, Magick. I went there with you. And I just remember the sweetness of the ginger and the flowers at that time. And it amplifies that tenderness and that sweetness. And so nature helps us, you know, to go to just be and to allow ourselves to really feel the feelings that very often in our lives we just press into compartments and we get, you know, too busy for. So, you know, I too had just a very I was exhausted just from what I was doing. And what I needed that day was just to, you know, deeply nourish myself with Grandmother Earth, with the sky, with the flowers, with the richness of the soil and the beautiful stones and these temple spaces there, you know, took me into places that I could, you know, restore myself, you know, and just let that exhaustion flow out of me. I walked out of there feeling extraordinarily refreshed. And I remember that, you know, I gained just an amazing amount of energy. I felt like I had just been on like a 3-week vacation from just, you know, spending, you know, one day in EO Valley. So yeah, that was, do you remember that day?
I do, yeah. I mean, the valley and the whole island is alive. You know, in the shamanic realms, in multidimensional reality, everything is alive and we are everything. The plants are alive, the trees are alive. And on these retreats, I'm emanating this field of that awareness, of that experience of reality. And so when people walk into these places, things can happen that they never could have imagined. I remember the first time that I was on a retreat in Hawaii, and there was a tree, and this tree actually called me over to it. And I'm like, that's interesting, okay. And I was, you know, somehow guided, you know, it was subtle. it's not like the tree has a mouth that starts opening and talking, you know, and there's sounds coming out of the tree. It's this very subtle thing, which is different than when one is using a teacher plant, for example, where things can be really intense. This is a training in the subtle realms. And when you start to notice those and pay attention to those, they get bigger and more amplified. And this tree had me come over to it, and I was guided to walk up and to touch the tree and kind of wrap my arms around the tree. And as I did that, I closed my eyes and laid my head on the tree, and then I disappeared. And everything disappeared. The tree disappeared. Hawaii disappeared. I didn't exist. There was nothing but the void, nothing but the nothingness. And in that deep, profound silence where I didn't exist, neither did time. I might have been hugging that tree for 1 second or 10 years. There was no me to notice or be aware of that. Time is only existing in the mind. It's a creation of the mind. And when we go beyond the mind into multidimensional reality, it is non-existent. I remember driving around the corner on the West Maui mountains once in the middle of the night in a very remote area where there is nothing there. It's just nature. It's about 1 a.m. and my friend and I came around the corner, and all of a sudden there was an ancient Hawaiian village there. And there were people walking down the streets, and they were carrying pineapples and buckets of things and interacting on the streets. And it wasn't like full daytime or nighttime. They had this sepia tone quality to it. And I was just enamored by it. And after we drove through it, I pulled over and I'm like, "Did you see that?" And she's like, "You mean the town?" And we saw the same thing.
Awesome.
You know, I had someone on one of my retreats. We had gone to a birthing site, and he was guided to go and sit in a very specific spot and to sit there and concentrate on the thing that he had come on the retreat for, this healing that he needed. And he started hearing drumming in the background. And as he heard the drums, he started to hear footsteps. And he looked over, and there were these ancient Hawaiians that were coming into the sacred site. And they were wearing ancient Hawaiian regalia and capes. And they were carrying staffs. And they were blowing conch shells and beating drums and chanting. And they came and they surrounded him. And they did a healing on him, which was profound and changed his life. Because that's the thing that happens in these sites. Miracles happen. Things that couldn't happen outside of these sites happen in the sites. You know, people come with disease and they leave without them. You know, there was a lady that came with alcoholism, and she just walked into that temple on Maui I mentioned earlier, the healing site up on the hill, and she laid down on the earth, and she had a vision of a healing that took place, and she walked out, and she never had another craving for alcohol again.
Awesome.
Not another craving. So they're potent. So I laid down in the Neil Valley. Do you want to say something, Mara?
No, go ahead.
I laid down in the Neil Valley. I was on this rock, and I'm like, I want to know the truth about whether to open my relationship up, and I'm feeling all this fear, and maybe about 10 minutes of just being with the fear and welcoming it and really allowing it to fully be there, so much that I merge with it. You know, when I'm not resistant to my emotions and I fully merge with them, not only do they move, but they take me on an incredible psychedelic experience of truly being awakened in the miraculous experience of this now. And in that, I had a memory flash in. Because the sites do a lot of things. You can have downloads or epiphanies or cathartic release or memories or trauma release or light body activations. There's so many different experiences people have. And on this day, I had a memory. It flashed before my eyes. And it was me when I was about maybe 3 years old, something like that. And my mom was about to drive away to go to work. And I was hysterical, crying that she was leaving. Now, I dropped into that memory and I began to fully experience it as if it was happening now. And the island, this sacred site, was literally holding me to be able to do this. And as I sat there and felt it, I re-experienced all of this pain and trauma of her leaving. Now, this was a precognitive age, so I didn't have the ability to tell you right now what was happening then, but now I could see that what was happening is I was having an existential crisis. My mom and me were actually like merged. We were one. And if she left, that meant the end of me. And so I was literally, it was facing death, straight up. And I sat in the valley. And of course, when it happened and when we're young, we don't know that all we have to do is just love and be with these experiences and they heal and resolve. Instead, we distract ourselves from them, we move away from them, we're resistant to them, and our culture and our family all teach us to do this. And so then it gets trapped in our cellular memory and inside of our energy fields, and then it attracts future situations to bring us into connection with that so we can heal it. But it doesn't look like that to us, of course. It looks like, a tyrant. But so I got a chance, like what a beautiful chance to actually relive it. And the site held space for me for the next 2 hours to feel it. Sometimes these things empty and happen in an instant. Sometimes they happen without the need for cathartic release or pain. They're in joy, and sometimes we have to relive them like this. I was so joyful to be living this experience. I was at a workshop once, and the guy said at the beginning, he said, I want everybody here to give me a thumbs up if you're good with confidentiality. And I said, sure, thumbs up. And he said a few other things. And then he said, I want you to give me a thumbs up if you're willing to, to commit that you're going to enjoy the day today. And I said, I don't know that I can commit to that. I'm committed to reality and authenticity, and I don't know what's going to be present for me today. And he said, oh, well, actually, Magick, I think we're on the same page, because my definition of joy is fully being with whatever is. So if you're angry, then that's joy if you're fully in your anger. And I said, well, that I can commit to. That's beautiful. So, there was another lady that had depression for 5 years, and she was guided to a rock. And she went over to this rock, and the rock said to lay on top of it. And she laid on top of this rock, and the rock began to do a psychic surgery on her, disconnecting and unwiring ways that her brain wasn't working properly and rewiring it in ways that it needed to be, having it start to fire neurons and make dendrite connections where it wasn't. And she stood up from the rock and forgot to take her depression medication for the next 5 days. And then when her boyfriend pointed it out, she said, I don't need it anymore. Now, I don't recommend people stop taking their medication, but it was very powerful. And so these sites can heal and resolve just about anything, but they also, on a spiritual level, people come with material desires, and that's fine. I invite people, bring the thing that you've never been able to create. Bring the thing you've never been able to shift, change, manifest, that pattern that's never gone away, that's been haunting you your whole life. Typically, that thing is going to shift really quickly in this field, and then we can get on to what your soul's really there for, which is ultimately to awaken out of all the illusion, awaken out of the wanting, which is a never-ending cycle of trying to get something that's going to actually bring fulfillment. But because that's a temporary state, it can never actually be what we really need. In fact, you can never get enough of what you don't really need. So as we continue to seek things, shiny objects and cars and people and sex and relationship and all the different things that we have the illusion are going to bring us happiness, they only bring us a temporary sense of fulfillment. I mean, how many times have you wanted something really bad, a new TV or whatever it is, and you get it and you're so excited and happy, and a week or two later, it's just another thing. And you're on to the next thing that you need to make you happy. And so ultimately, these sites are waking us up out of that illusion and into the awakened state of our infinite nature, that we actually are God. we are everything, and there's nothing that we need because everything is right here already.
Exactly. And, you know, that's what I experience when I go, because, you know, I go with this intention. I mean, if you go to, anybody can go to Hawaii as a tourist, it's very different. When you bring an intention, and when you really give yourself the spaciousness to allow yourself to let go and to just feel the sensuousness of Hawaii is extraordinary. You know, if you give yourself really the space and the time, you don't have to think. You don't have, you know, she will do her magic on you, and if you allow this to happen, then your sensations will heighten. I mean, that is what happens for me. It's why I go to Hawaii once or twice a year now for the last about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and I find it's just it restores me. I actually, you know, really hunger for this, and so for me the awakening of my creative energy happens, and so it's not only that you know, you have to know beforehand, you know, some particular problem. Sometimes we have something that we really want to manifest, or that we really want to, you know, heal or let go of. Sometimes it's about every time I've been in Hawaii, I generate and store and restore myself with enough energy to just like really take off for the rest of my year, and have energy to write and to create and to you know, really go deeper into my own wisdom. I love to you know, often in those spaces, you know, for me, myself, I'll guide people, and also I would like for myself, you know, to write, or, you know, to write poetry, or, you know, to just, you know, really feel the health and the vibrations of all of nature. You're right that we don't really have to go to Hawaii or any place anywhere to feel these things. Actually, we're really going to come home. We already have all of these energies. It's just that when we go there with intention, and the spaces themselves, particularly amplify, are the gifts inside that we've already got. And that's what fascinates me about going to sacred sites, because it, you know, it opens up a space inside of myself where I find out, like, wow, you know, I have more inside than I even knew was there. That's been my experience. And, you know, I've taken women on retreats there, and also, you know, done spiritual sexuality in the retreats, and the way your body feels, the way you can really, you know, deeply relax and deeply feel pleasure and joy. That in itself is really a great restoration, a great nourishment, and a great healing.
Yeah, thank you, Amara. The sites, I mean, basically the site amplifies, catalyzes, and accelerates all evolution, all awakening, anything that is ripe to come through you, anything that is your true authentic self. It's going to help heal anything in the way of it, and to amplify and catalyze that coming through you. I remember we went to a site once, and it's great. I see somebody on the call that was actually there, and we went into this lava tube, which is a very potent, very, very sacred site that I don't take every group. It's incredible. In fact, I know many Hawaiian elders that have never been in this site. It's one of the most potent sites I know of, and it resonates the frequency of the feminine at a very deep level. And one of the people that I was with, these were friends, didn't really believe in sacred sites and mystical experiences and amplification of our nature and all of this. He's a really beautiful, lovely man, but it's just not his thing. He's very scientifically oriented, and he's an inventor and invented a lot of things. And so he was just along for the ride, and he went into the site with us. And when the three of us, besides him, were blown away by what had happened for us in there, but so was he, because he had an invention of this, I don't even know what it was, some kind of, free energy device or something that he'd been stuck on for years, constantly working on, constantly dreaming about, trying to figure out how this missing piece was going to happen that seemed impossible. And sitting inside this site, it came in, and he realized it. And so the sites, they just bring you what you need. That's why it doesn't matter what people's intentions are. You can bring whatever intentions you want to. You're usually going to get it, and you're going to get whatever, your soul's journey is really on, and whatever's next for you is going to get catalyzed and amplified. I remember in another lava tube once, there was a woman, and this lava tube was pitch black dark. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and she was sitting in there meditating when suddenly there was this brilliant white light that just lit up everything. And she was a little freaked out by it because it was so bright, and she's sitting alone in this dark cave. She thought that I must have snuck up on her and was shining this bright light in her face. So she ended up opening her eyes, but there was nothing there. And then her third eye started having all these tinglings and buzzings and spinnings, and the site was just opening up her psychic senses, opening up her connections to the Nagual and to the levels of reality that are beyond this physical, dense reality that we typically live in. The Hawaiians, there's 7 principles of ancient Hawaiian spirituality called Hoonah. And one of those 7 principles, by the way, if you can embody all of these principles, you're basically fully awakened in multidimensional reality. And one of those principles is that there are no limits. No limits. And I've experienced this many times in the sacred sites of Hawaii. I've been in 2 places at once. I've teleported. I've been invisible. I have, telepathy is that's not a big deal. But the shape shifting, all these kinds of things. I've walked through solid objects. The other principle of Hoonah that goes along with that, another one of the 7 principles, is the principle that says the world is what you think it is. We live in a relative reality, and there is no reality like Amara's reality, and there's no reality like mine, and there's no reality like Joella's. Everyone's reality is a little different, and yours is actually being created by your thoughts. And all of our thoughts, all of them, are limiting, because by definition, they are in language, and language compresses what is the infinite down into something. It separates and divides things into little chunks. So all your thoughts, by definition, are not the totality of reality. They are illusion. And these sites wake us up to that. There's a woman that went into this site on Maui, and she was sitting by this pool and waterfall, and a leaf dropped on her head and said, "Get in the pond." And she didn't want to get in the pond because the sun wasn't out, and it was a little cool out towards the end of the day. And then another leaf dropped on her head, and it said, "Get in the pond." And, this is the way inner guidance and the shamanic realms can work with us. And she'd been practicing following this. So she finally said, okay. And she got into this pond. And as soon as she got into the pond, she started to lay on her back as she was guided to. And everything disappeared. No pond, no waterfall, no sounds, no water, no cold. She was in the deep silence of the nothingness, of the awareness of all that is, of her infinite nature. She opened her eyes, and the sky was there, and it started moving and swirling around. Things are not solid in Hawaii like they are in our typical material reality. They're moving and shifting. I remember I walked out on my lanai on Molokai once, and I looked up at the sky, and it was a starry night. I was living on Molokai, the birthplace of sorcery, and all the stars in the sky started moving across the sky like I was in a planetarium. And I screamed and was jumping up and down and called my girlfriend to come out and look with me. And she saw the same thing, the whole sky moving. I was in a lava tube once, and this particular lava tube is a birthing site. And it's a place where in ancient Hawaii, when the third male born to the king was going to be born, they would crawl the queen on her belly through this narrow passageway back into this pitch black dark chamber with baby powder soft sand. And in that place where you can't see your hand in front of your face, and the protocol is not to bring light in there, she would birth this child who was destined to become the seer, or the psychic, the prophet for the Hawaiians. And this person would be held there for their first 21 days of life so that they could develop their sight on the inside rather than the outside. It's a very powerful place. In fact, I took a lady there once in a group, and she went into the site wanting to create her next partner. She was an older lady, she was a widower, and she went into this cave, which only has a small chamber in there. There's not that many places you can go in there. But she was in there for hours. And she came out running and skipping down the beach. And she's like, oh my God, I went into the cave. And then I went to the other side, and there was this beautiful meadow, and there were deer, and there were flowers, and there were rainbows and unicorn. And there was this giant, beautiful blue lake. And there was this chalice next to the lake. And I drank the blue liquid, and then all these rainbows in the sky. And then on a white horse, my new husband rode up. Mortimer, he came riding up, and he scooped me up, and we went and we made love. And she said this whole story, right? That it's physically impossible in the third dimension. And so she told us the story, and then she went back to where she was from after the retreat. And within 6 months, she has met a man named Mortimer, who is the man from that experience. Now, there's not that many Mortimers out there. I mean, I was in only one, probably, right? I was in that. You only needed one, right? I was in that cave once. And I was in a place that didn't exist before in the cave. I've been in there many times, but there was a tunnel that hadn't been there before. And so I'm following the tunnel, and I can't see a thing. And I actually got frightened. It's really dark, and it will activate anything that's living inside of us that needs healing. The lava tubes are very powerful, and they take us right into the unknown, right into the depth of what we're typically avoiding. Death, the unknown, the deep void. And it took me right there, and I was on the edge. And so I had my hands on the wall, and I was following the wall forward so that if I needed to get out, I knew I could always just follow my hands backwards, because it was like breadcrumbs, right? So I'm following the wall forward, and I finally get to this place where the fear gets so big that I'm like, I can't do it. I can't go forward. I tried to sit with it. I tried to just be with it, and I couldn't stay with it. And so I turned around to exit the cave, and I turned all the way around and put my hands behind me to go backwards from where I came, and there was a wall there. Oh, shit. I could not go backwards. Wow. The site will deliver metaphorical teachings to show you a microcosm of things you're doing in your life, and take you into situations where you can make new choices through initiations that will change your life forever. Usually they're not that dramatic. For most people on the retreat, sometimes I have intensities that I have to go through. So I had to turn around and go forward, no going backwards. And I did, and I ended up, finding an exit. And that moment changed my life forever, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very potent.
Wow. Amazing.
So, yeah, I mean.
So tell me a little about the, you've mentioned it a few times, the death sites.
Yes. So the death sites, there's a place on all the Hawaiian islands, each Hawaiian island, that the Hawaiians call the leaping place of the souls. It's usually on the westernmost point on the island, as in the Deer tribe. The same with the Hawaiians, the west is the place of death, change, and transformation. And so that westernmost spot typically holds that frequency. And the Hawaiians say that when people die, their soul, their spirit leaves the body, and then it travels across the Hawaiian island on the Night Marcher's Trail, they call it, to the leaping place of the souls. And at that spot, that's where spirit transcends this physical reality and goes back into the spiritual realms. And so, these spots were only used for high ceremony regarding death. Death that comes in many forms. It doesn't have to be the death of your physical body. But they did bring the kings and the queens to some of these spots. And there were some of them, there's cliffs, and they would lower a commoner down with the king and the queen's bones because their bones contained mana, they believed, and they didn't want their mana to get into the hands of any enemies. And so they would lower them down on these ropes, and they would go into one of those caves and bury the bones where nobody knew where they were. And then they'd get back on the ropes, and then the ropes would be cut, and they would fall to their death, taking the secret of where those bones are to their death. And so these sites, they can catalyze and shift and heal us in an egoic way, to heal our ego, to heal our illusion that we actually exist, that there's actually a me, that these thoughts and these opinions and these ideas are actually this thing that I call magic. They can heal me from that and take me into a place of realizing my true and infinite nature. Or they could help you heal some fear that you have, or a doubt, or some kind of pattern or belief. The first time I went, I had a debilitating fear of rejection. And it had me not speaking in public. It had me not in my advertising business at the time, making sales calls. It had me not calling my vendors and checking on things that I needed to check on. It had me doing lots of non-essential tasks at my business, like making spreadsheets and charts and reports. And I wondered why the business wasn't growing. And, and it also stopped me in relationship. I hadn't had a relationship in 5 years because I was afraid of saying things that were real, of being myself, of having people judge me and reject me. And actually, I was studying NLP and hypnosis and Silva and many other modalities at the time, and I had tried all of them extensively to heal this, and they hadn't healed it. They had made maybe a slight dent. And my business had been, virtually flatlined, maybe a little bit of growth over that 5-year period. So I went to Hawaii, not with the intention to heal that fear, but I actually went with 3 intentions. One, I wanted $1 million to come in from one client. And at the time, I had an ad agency. Maybe I had a client that was spending $20,000 or $30,000 a year. It was a huge leap. And I also wanted to create my next amazing partnership. And then the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to experience God, wanted to experience spirit. And so I went into this death site, and just kind of big, right? I had big things. That's how I roll. So I'm in this death site, and my teacher is talking about how in these sites, because the crack between the worlds is there, and the veils between all the parallel universes that are existing, and the veils between different realities are so thin that one could change something in an instant there that could take lifetimes in 3D physical reality. And so I focused on the sun setting, and I knew whatever I did in this site would be amplified. And I took this, it was like a picture in my mind's eye of the fear, and I just shot it into the sun and had it explode and disintegrate in the sun, and then I cut the cords to it and did a little ceremony that Hawaiian Hoonah taught me. And when I did it, I knew in that moment that it was gone. And once it was gone, I had an epiphany, because I was sitting there in the emptiness, and all of a sudden I had the epiphany that I'd never realized before, which is that actually in my business, it's not just the fear of rejection that's holding me back, it's actually my fear of success. Because if I had $1 million client, I've only got one employee, I don't actually know how to fulfill an order that would be that large. It would be a multi-market order. I don't know other markets. It would take us weeks to pull it off, and they would probably want it quickly. And all of these different stories were flooding into my consciousness as to why I couldn't do it. And so I just took that and I sent it into the sun and exploded it and had it disintegrate and cut the cords to it. Now, I've tried to do this in Dallas and in, Phoenix and places, and it didn't work. But in this multiplied field of death, boom, it was gone. And so then I went to the birthing site, and I just sat in the birthing site and concentrated on these intentions. And then I went to the Hoonah site, which is a star navigation site, and we went in at midnight. And there were 4 Hawaiians on the corners of the site holding space for us and tiki torches. And we were told, follow your inner guidance in every single moment. Every step you take, be guided, because this place is so high vibe, so reverence is so needed here. And so I just took each step, just connecting with my body and with the space and being guided. And I sat by this rock, and it was a full moon. And I did an open eye meditation where I looked out at the trees as they were swaying in the wind. And as I dropped deep into the emptiness, as I slowed way down, because the shamanic realms exist in the slower pace of parts of our brain that are typically not the dominant parts. And when we drop into that space, into the silence, it opens up realms that aren't normally open to us. And I dropped deep into that space, and then I went into something that the Hawaiians call Hakalau, which is expanded perceptual awareness, where my gaze became seeing everything 180 degrees all around me all at once, rather than the narrow focus that our logical sequential left brain likes to use, where it narrows in on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. That's a 3D experience. This is opening up the multidimensional experience. And as I looked out at those trees, all of a sudden, I wasn't on the islands in Hawaii anymore. I was in an ancient city, some kind of city of brilliant white light. And I was being activated by being in that city, and cells were being activated, and DNA was being activated, and my brain was building new connections and dendrites, and it was a light body activation. And then it flipped me out a little bit, and so I kind of shook my head, and I was back in the jungle, back in Hawaii. And I took a few deep breaths and centered myself and went back into my meditation, and all of a sudden I'm back in this ancient city again. And I went back and forth between those for the rest of the night. And then I went back to Dallas, where I was living. And within 6 weeks, I had a new client show up and purchase $962,000 worth of advertising all at once. It wasn't quite the 1 million that I had intended, but pretty close.
Yeah.
And I had a new partner, which was one of the best relationships of my life in that 6-week period of time as well. So I also want to circle back for a moment to my friend who wanted to get married, but he wasn't quite sure. And so he was guided through Iao Valley into the jungle, into the bushes, back by a rock deep in the jungle. And he sat down there wondering why he was there. Why have I been guided through the jungle? And as he sat there, he looked to his left, and something caught his eye, and behind a leaf in the bushes there, he saw something dangling from the bush on a fishing wire. And he pulled the leaves back and looked, and dangling on this fishing wire in the middle of nowhere were 2 wedding rings intertwined in each other. Wow. And in that moment, he knew, this is 100%, I'm going to marry this woman. Wow. It was really beautiful. And then the rest of the retreat became, when am I going to marry her? When am I going to propose, right? And it was so beautiful because on the last day, the last site we were going to, we're walking down towards the site, which is out on this peninsula. It's a site that they say was built by the Menehunis, which are these ancient Hawaiian magical beings, kind of like leprechauns. And it's this beautiful site. And we're walking down, and the sun is setting, and it's so gorgeous. And I'm thinking, when is he going to do this? And all of a sudden, these whales, like at least a half a dozen whales, just off the peninsula, start fully jumping out of the water, full breaching and landing. And he still isn't getting it. And finally, my assistant on the retreat kind of gives him the elbow and is like, hey, I think it's time. And he ended up dropping down on one knee while all these whales were jumping. You know, the whales, they say, and many indigenous cultures say that the whales are the record keepers of the planet. They are the elders. They hold the Akashic records. And when I got to Maui in 2005 to live, you know, many years after I'd been leading retreats there, I was out on a boat, and the same thing happened to me. These whales surrounded the boat, and they started to breach and jump in the water all around me. And as they did that, they took over my consciousness, and they shifted my vision and my feelings and my hearing. And I looked out and I saw Maui as fifth dimensional reality. I saw it as Lemuria, the ancient civilization of oneness and unity consciousness. And I can't even describe to you what I saw and heard and felt, because it can't be compressed into language. There is no way to describe it. But tears were flowing down my face for the next 45 minutes as it was quickening me. And then the whales told me that Maui and all of Hawaii is a quickening station. It is simultaneously the third dimensional reality that we've all been living in. And at the exact same time, it's the fifth dimensional and multidimensional reality that we're moving into. And that when people come to Hawaii, they are quickened to this higher frequency, high vibration of where we're moving into. And conditioning and wounds and our history and traumas are healed and resolved. And that my job is to bring people to this field so that they can experience this. And then something interesting happened, because I was also working with a shaman at the time who says that he's the man that you were reading about if you read Carlos Castaneda's books, that he's the man that experienced the things in those books. And he could be in 220 places at once. And he was working with me every day for almost 2 years. And he would sometimes physically be there, sometimes etherically be there. And I'm in Hawaii and he's on the mainland. And this is a time that was very shamanic. I had like 5% of me was in the tonal world during this time. And I was experiencing a lot of things. And right after the experience with the whales on this boat, this woman comes up to me that I know, but I didn't know she was on the boat. And she says, Magick, thank you so much for what you shared with me on the back of the boat just now. It was really meaningful, and it really has impacted me greatly. And I said, that was somebody else. You must be mistaken, because I've been sitting here the whole time, and my friend's been right next to me, and I've been having this incredible experience with the whales. Let me tell you about it. And she said, ha, 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 that's not funny. I'm serious. That was really important, what you said with me, and I really appreciate your heart and the wisdom you shared. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but that wasn't me. I've been here the whole time. And we went back and forth like this until we were actually like arguing. And eventually she says, well, you know, if you're going to be like that, that's just fine. And she turns around and kind of storms off. And I yelled after her, fine, I was back there. I can be in 2 places at once. And I was just kidding. But as I said it, I realized, I think that's what happens. I think that's maybe what this shaman might be teaching me right now, and I don't even know it. And that began a series of events just like that, where people were like, thank you for what you just did over here and over here and over here, that I had no idea what had occurred. I wasn't there consciously until one day I was in a deep ceremony on my own retreat in Hawaii on a hiking trail when I was very, very tired. And I decided to see if I could be in two places at once. And the test was, can I hike on this trail, which was a gnarly trail, lots of banyan tree roots over the trail and mud and rocks. And you had to really have your wits about you to not trip and fall. And I decided that I was actually going to go home and go to sleep and take a nap while at the same time walking on this trail. And so I did it, and I came back and I told my friend about it. And then I said, you know, this is the first time I've ever really done this consciously. What if I just made it up? You know, maybe I made it up. Just like this guy that had the healing down at the sacred site, the birthing site where the Hawaiians came and they surrounded him and they did this healing on him. Well, when the healing was done, which healed something that he'd been working on his whole life, and it shifted and healed. And he came out of that and he was elated at first, but then he had that doubt come in. And he was like, what if that didn't really happen? What if that was my imagination? Because sometimes these shamanic realms, they're not that different than our dream world, than our imagination. Those are the crack between the worlds. That is the alpha state, which is the connection between consciousness and unconsciousness, tonal and narwhal, between multidimensional reality and 3D reality. And so he wondered, was this really real? And he looked over and there was another retreat participant sitting across the grotto. And he wondered, I wonder if she saw anything. And so he walks over to her and he says, how long have you been standing there or sitting there? And she said, she's a real kind of smart ass. And she said, long enough. And then he said, long enough for what? And she said, long enough to see. You know, like maybe those Hawaiians that came in, the ones that were chanting and did the healing. And, you know, she saw everything that happened, which was very validating for him. And so I wanted to know, can I validate my own experience of this being in two places at once? So I told my partner, we had the bed made up in a very particular way before we left that day. We've been doing some work on the bed, so we both knew what the bed looked like. I said, I'm going to go in the drawer. I'm going to pull something out of the drawer and place it right in the center of the bed so I can prove to myself that this is real. And I want you to validate it for me too. And so I told her about it, and I went back to sleep while I was walking on this hiking trail. And I went into my room and I went into the night table drawer and I pulled this thing out and I put it in the center of the bed. And when we got home that day, there it was, sitting in the center of the bed. And so this is a training ground. These sacred sites are initiatory, awakening training grounds that wake people up to what they're really ready for next. You know, there's a sacred site that's about authentic self-expression, about really being who you are in this life. And I took a man there who was so shut down, particularly in his throat chakra, that he was living alone and he didn't have a job because he found that most of his jobs, he had to interact with people, and he was so shy and he stuttered. He had a very abusive childhood. His father swung him around by his feet and knocked him into lamps and things, threw him off the high dive into the swimming pool when he was 4 to teach him how to swim. He had a lot of trauma. And as we were sitting in this sacred site and I was doing a transmission, you know, similar to something I'm doing with you right now, something got activated in him and he stood up and just started screaming and yelling and just expressing all of this suppressed anger and rage that had been inside of him for 40 years, but never had a place to come out. And it felt so good afterwards. He started jumping up and down and saying, oh my God, that was so great. That was so great. And then he started doing it some more. And then it started moving into like a sounding and a toning and a movement of sound. And then I started to do some more teaching and I started singing the teaching to him. And then he stood up and started singing his intentions out into the universe in this powerful declaratory way. It was so beautiful to see that creativity and that expression come through him. And after that retreat, he got a job as a manager at some bicycle shops. And he ended up having friends. I saw him at a party after that. I mean, the guy was revolutionized by what that site catalyzed in him. It's very powerful what these sites can do, and generally what the power of love can do. Because ultimately what I'm doing when I'm leading retreat is I'm transmitting unconditional love. And unconditional love, when you're swimming in a field of unconditional love, you're marinating in a container of it, then it's going to slowly permeate you. And it's going to find all the nooks and crannies inside of you where you don't love yourself, where you don't love some part of yourself, whether it's a fear or a doubt or a behavior or a way of being or something that's happened to you or your history or something about your place in the planet. It's going to find it, and it's going to bring it into consciousness and bring it into reality in the now so that it can be healed. And that looks a lot of different ways. But ultimately, that's what's occurring. I remember on the beach in Hawaii, I found a baby bird that was laying in the sand, and it had fallen off a cliff, and it appeared to be dead. And I sat in meditation with this bird for about 20 to 30 minutes asking, what is it for me? Because it was in a sacred site. It was in a death site. And I knew that there was just powerful healing and teaching for me somehow in it. And all I had to do was sit and receive, and I would know what it was. And so I sat there, and I had to work with the part of me that wanted to change it, that wanted to heal it, that wanted to put it in a little box and take it to the bird doctor, and all the different conditioning that was running inside of me, because what I wanted was the truth. Like, what am I guided to do here? What is the truth? And, on my retreats, they're experiential. I have no agenda, no schedule. I have no idea what I'm going to do on retreat other than we're going to go to sacred sites every day. And I invite every person on the retreat to be in that same unknown and to follow their guidance in every moment. I don't announce when the day starts or when I'm going to go do a teaching. It's a telepathic thing. You learn by tuning in on your psychic senses on the inside when you need to be aware and what you need to do. When people come to me and say, should I bring closed-toed shoes today on the retreat? And I'm like, I don't know. What does your inner guidance tell you? Because I don't. How could I possibly know? How could you know with your logical mind? Our logical mind is so narrow in its ability to know things. And so whether somebody's already masterful and good at their connection with their inner guidance or not, by the time they're with me for a week, and at the beginning of the retreat, I teach this ancient Hawaiian technique to alter one's experience of time so that you actually experience the week like it's a month. And so, you drop somebody in the French countryside that doesn't speak French for a month, they're going to come out with some level of fluency. I mean, maybe not totally, but they're going to understand some French. And it's going to, get in there. And it's the same thing. You're marinating in this container of unconditional love and following your inner guidance in every moment, then that is going to change you. And so there's this bird, and after sitting with it for a while and really not seeing any movement or anything, I see a tiny little breath. And I'm like, wow, it's alive. And all I'm guided to do, though, is to love it. And so I just start beaming unconditional love into this bird. And the bird immediately, after being practically dead, stands up, is like wobbling around, trying to stand, turns around, faces me, and starts walking towards me. That's the power of love. It's what we're all here for. What could be more important than to learn to love every aspect of yourself and reality in every moment? Yes. That was my single-pointed goal for years. Yes. My friend did he was working on a documentary for people who had near-death experiences. And actually, the most common experience that everybody had beyond the white light at the end of the tunnel and seeing whatever deity or God was important to them was that they were told just before they came back that the purpose of our lives is to love. Now, I'm not talking about love the way people are normally speaking about love, which is actually an evaluative mental process. When we talk about love, typically in our culture, we're talking about how much we like something. You know, I love this person the most. We like them the most is what we're really saying. We're evaluating them against all others, and we're ranking them number one, and we're ranking them in this place called love. That's a mind process. It's a feeling process. Both are temporary. It's an evaluation, and it's a separation and a dividing. Unconditional love doesn't have boundaries. There's no separation. There isn't any falling into or out of it. We already are unconditional love, and we're just here to wake up to our true nature. And the way that we can do that is by focusing on, you know, love consciously onto ourselves, which is something that I teach people how to do. So Joella has sent me a little message that says I've been talking for a long time. So I will see if Amara has anything to say before we can go into a wrap up.
Well, I really enjoyed listening to the stories, and it's just been really nice this evening to go into a very receptive place, just to kind of groove into how you roll. And I am very turned on and very, I cannot wait to do this retreat with you. It's been fun being quiet tonight, and it's been fun following the threads of your stories. I am really excited because I know that when we're in Hawaii together, when we're on Maui, that the magical, spontaneous moments are just going to be extraordinary. I can feel it, and so that's really what I would like to say. And so, yeah, do you want to talk about the retreat at all, or do you want to say anything else? I mean, you can go on both our websites, amaracharles.com and Sacred Voyages, and find out about what's happening next. I know we both have a lot of things happening, and but this particular retreat, we only have room for a certain amount of people, and that we want to keep it small because we're all going to just stay very closely connected and really receive the direct transmission. That's what this is really about. And it's I love the part about being in the unknown and about allowing the days to unfold and allowing ourselves to be guided by what is happening and where we want to go and what our inner guidance tells us and so forth. And though we may have slightly different language, what I'm really thrilled about is that at the core, at the heart of what we share, it is all about love, and it is all about allowing that love to permeate and guide us. So, yeah, the details. What would you like to say about the retreat itself?
Well, firstly, Amara and I, in some sense, will be facilitating the retreat, but actually the real teacher on the retreat is the island of Maui. And the island of Maui will deliver and bring you whatever you need on a conscious level and on a soul level. And I trust that. And it's the kind of retreat that just about every time people experience a miracle. They experience something that they hadn't been able to experience before, whether it's experiencing oneness for the first time, unity, deep peace and emptiness and nothingness, or it's the actualization of something or the release of something. And people's lives are literally different for the rest of their lives. It's not a temporary change. My website has testimonial videos on it, and it's such a blessing, and I feel so grateful that it's like almost every single person has this kind of experience. And so I would like to say for myself that, and I'm sure Amara is available as well, if anybody wants to contact me and they want to have a direct conversation and ask questions or have me share more about the retreat itself, because this call's purpose was more to actually give you a flavor and a taste of the sacred sites rather than of the retreat. But if you have more specific and logistical kind of questions or any kind of questions, I'm available. You can just email me. And also, we're going to have a talk that's the focus. And, like I said, we didn't want to do it on this talk, but somewhere around the 19th of April, and we'll be putting it in newsletters and on our website, but somewhere right around there, we're going to have a talk that's specifically a Q&A about the retreats. The retreat is filling pretty quickly, so we may not need that talk by April 19th, but it's on the calendar. Also, I want to say that we're going to do another one of these, and it'll be different because we don't have a plan of what we're going to do on these calls. So whatever stories and whatever transmission comes through will be unique for whoever's there right around that time as well. Just a couple of quick details about the retreat. It's on Maui. It's in a very incredible location where the mana or the power of the land is just off the charts. There's over 100-foot waterfall on the property, lush tropical rainforest, swimming pool, hot tub overlooking the ocean. It's magical and powerful land.
Yes.
And it's a week long, and it's an immersion. We're going to create a shamanic container, and we're going to separate ourselves from the 3D Western world for that time that we're together. We're not going to go to the store. We're not going to go to a restaurant. We're not going to be connecting in with the mainland. We're going to be deeply in this time-traveling capsule of love and multidimensional mystical reality. And every day it deepens because people are sharing their experiences, and Amara and I are continuing to give more teachings, which creates the container to be richer and richer. It's like if you've ever been on a Kwadoshka and they do a pipe ceremony and you can feel that container come in place. This is like we're doing pipe ceremony all day long for a week that feels like a month. And, because we're going to these sacred sites and we're doing these transmissions. And of course, there's downtime and there's integration time where you can hang out by the pool and meditate and stroll. And the meals in the evenings are going to be catered by a gourmet, amazing caterer with amazing food that should be mostly organic. And it will change your life. That I can pretty much promise you.
Yes, I know it's going to change our lives, and I'm looking forward to the change that happens.
Yeah, and I've got materials too. If you want to email me, I could send you some materials so you could look at stuff more on your own, and I can direct you to some short videos if you want to watch more videos or testimonial videos. Whatever you want, just send an email. My website again is sacredvoyages.com, and my email address is m as in magic @sacredvoyages.com. And so, yeah, shoot me an email and I'll answer questions, or we can set up time to talk. And Amara too, right?
So if you want to find out more about me, you can reach me at Amara Charles, AmaraCharles.com. And you can find out more about what I do. I focus and specialize in spiritual sexuality and women's empowerment retreats, and you can delve deeply. I have lots of testimonials and videos and so forth on my site too. And if you have questions, you can also email me at amaracharles.com.
Yeah, if you already know me, I encourage you to check out Amara's website, because she is an extraordinary woman that's been on this path with the deer tribe for many years. I think of her as an elder on the path. I don't know if they call you that, but she's been through a lot of ceremonies and a lot of gateways and a lot of initiations, and she's kind of the face of an entire part of their teaching called the Kwadoshka teachings, and she's written a book on that subject, the only book on the subject. It's in almost any bookstore around, and she's also deeply in a Zen. Is it Zen or is it a different form of Buddhism?
Tibetan Buddhism.
Tibetan Buddhism path with a powerful teacher that she studies with. And she's an amazing combination of many different things. And so, I'm so excited and feel so blessed to be a part of this call with you and to be leading a retreat with you.
Oh, well, I'm honored and blessed myself. And so sweet dreams and good evening.
Oh, Joella oh, and somebody else has asked me to say the retreat dates, which are July 7 through 14 on Maui. It's called the Mystical Heart Retreat. And the retreat is about that unconditional love we talked about. It's about the heart as the place that bridges the as above and the so below, the tonal and the nagwal, the physical and the mystical, the humanity and our divinity. Unconditional love is the place that is all of that, heals all of that, bridges all of that. And we'll be diving deeply into that. Beyond that, I have no idea what we will do because we don't know until we get there. But it's truly
the best part for me. That is the best part. And doing that and going to these places, you know, you and going there together, and the people who are coming already are very excited. It's going to be it's going to be a very mystical, magical time.
Life will never be the same again. So please shoot me an email, say hi, say hello. I love to connect with people, and hope to see you somewhere soon. Blessings. Thank you so much for being on the call.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night. Om Mani Padme Hum.